There are several steps to creating a compelling character. One of them, in my view, is that the character has to be realistic enough that readers can identify with him or her. Sometimes that means borrowing characteristics from people you know or people you've met. I know that in my case, I've developed a lot of characters, and some of whom have not been human, some of whom have been actually equine. All the horses in the books are based on horses I've either owned or own currently, and so it's very easy for me to have good horse characters. I don't have to develop them, I know them very well. Some of the non-horse characters are also based on people I know, friends or family members that I know very well, and all I have to do is put them into a different physical form, give them perhaps some different abilities, as I don't know any elves or dwarves or ulkas, and then have them react in the same way that those folks that I know would react. It's about idiosyncrasies. Everyone you know has them, and if you can give your characters some unique attributes, some idiosyncrasies, some peculiarities of personality, some flaws. I mean, everyone has them. The character will be three-dimensional, and it will develop as the story progresses. Perhaps the character has a reluctance to, many characters have, say, a reluctance to cross water, or they have an aversion to water, or they can't swim. You can work that particular detail in a number of places, and actually the plot can turn on that. If a character will not cross water without assistance, you suddenly, maybe the character suggests, well, let's not go that way, let's go this other way. Well, why? Oh, I don't know, I just don't feel like going that way right now. Maybe the character doesn't want to admit that he or she can't swim. But of course, you, the reader, know that. And so you're thinking, aha, well, I know why that's happening. Maybe the other characters in the party don't know. But because much mayhem ensues because we go this other way instead of the way that was originally planned. Those idiosyncrasies need to be firmly implanted in the author's mind, because they need to continue. They shouldn't just be introduced and forgotten. They need to help advance the story in some way. Doesn't mean that the plot turns on someone's idiosyncrasies, but those idiosyncrasies add to the overall picture for the entire progress of the story. And things like that will keep you from those comments by reviewers that the characters didn't behave in a consistent way. I've seen this complaint by readers in a number of reviews that I've read of fiction books where, that made no sense. What the character did made no sense. Okay? And either it actually makes sense, the author knows it, and you haven't yet learned why it makes sense, or maybe the author really hasn't got as clear a picture in his or her own mind of what the character is like, and therefore develops it in either multiple paths or doesn't develop it to the extent that needs to be, and therefore can lose track of that personality and can have it behave in an inconsistent manner. I think that backstories and flashbacks enrich the development of any character just as they do people in real life. You get to know a person and you learn more and more about them, and we are all a product of our past experiences. There are some experiences that shape our behavior forever after, and if you can understand why a character behaves the way he or she does, I think it's much easier to relate to that character. Some of us can empathize a lot more with a character whose life has been explained, at least in part. And of course there's a lot of modern tendency not to go back and explain things, but I like to do that only because it gives some insight into where we are. But you don't want to do that right out of the box, because Nobody gets all that information on first meeting. You have to kind of feel your way along in any relationship with any person and eventually pull in those details. There are some characters who are introduced in the heat of the moment. There are others that we have plenty of time to introduce gradually. But they all, even the secondary and tertiary characters are important. This is something that some authors do forget. Sometimes it's the secondary characters who are the most real, the most likable, the ones that the readers identify with the best. And it may just boil down to a single characteristic of personality. It may just boil down to something they said that resonates particularly well. Dialogue is one of the best ways to get to know a character. One of the best ways to expose a person is by listening to the way they interact through dialogue. And it's one of the easy ways, actually, to give insight into a character. Actions are a little more difficult because actions need to be described, actions need to have a basis. Dialogue is a great way to throw humor into the story. It's a great way to show that a character has a sense of humor. It's a great way to simply define relationships between characters. I like to use dialogue, and I use a lot of it.